This is the Living in Clarity podcast. My name is Brandon Fisher. This is Coach Ratner. And we are so excited to have Hila Oz back on the show. Hila, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me again. I'm so excited to be back.
We've been looking forward since you spoke here last time.
Oh my gosh. I had the time of my life, and I'm just so excited to get back into it.
How many views did we get on that one short?
2.1 million views on one short, and many of them with many hundreds of thousands of views.
That's crazy.
So there's lots of anti-Semitic, lots of hate, and of course you try to respond. You can't do it. You learn you can't respond to everybody. But I want to do this on camera to respond to some of this. That you're a European and not from Israel. Which can you explain that to us?
Of course. So first of all, anyone who thinks that skin color is a determining factor in ethnicity is clearly very, very ignorant. I always think that that's very funny because, first of all, let's set the record straight. All Jews are indigenous to Judea. All Jews come from here. The term Ashkenaz and Sephardi and Mizrahi just all refer to different places in the world that we were exiled to during Roman occupation and exile.
So before the destruction of the temple, there was no Sephardi and Ashkenaz. Everyone was the same.
Yeah. So Mizrahi was before the Romans, but that wasn't like a different sect of Judaism. It was just the Jews who stayed in the east. Mizrahi means east after the Babylonian exile. And then until Roman exile, basically hordes of Jews were brought to Rome on slave ships, and there were so many of us that no one wanted to buy us. This is actually a prophecy from the Tanakh, from the Bible. And so all of these Jews who had just come on these slave ships were basically kicked out of Rome, and they went to two different territories. One was called Ashkenaz, which is modern-day Germany, and the other was called Sfarad, which is modern-day Spain. And after that, these groups of people developed their own different cultures and customs, but they were all based on a foundation of Judaism. They weren't, if you look at the Sephardi and Ashkenazi Torah, they're the same. If you look at the prayers, they're almost identical.
Almost identical, yes.
And we're still keeping the same laws, of kashrut, of the holidays, of Shabbat, all that stuff. So it was just, honestly, some people were living in a warmer climate, some were living in a colder climate, and they had different foods available and stuff like that. But it's a newer thing. And so even if I was fully Ashkenazi Jewish, which I am not, which are the Jews who have been in Europe but are not from Europe, it wouldn't make me European. Actually, if you look genetically, Ashkenazi Jews who, until very, very recently, with the ingathering of the exiles, were not in contact with Sephardi Jews for thousands of years. They are closer genetically to Sephardi Jews and Mizrahi Jews and even Beta Israel Ethiopian Jews than they are to their European neighbors. But let's put that all aside for a second. I'm Jerusalemite. I'm Yerushalmi. My father's family has been here for generations. So when people say, go back to where you came from, done, did it. Thank you. It comes from nowhere. It's just I look at you and I have deemed you as the colonizer, and so now you must be European, which is insane.
Well, one of the common themes going on the same point here is a lot of the comments focus on the fact, we came from Egypt, or Abraham came from Mesopotamia. Mm-hmm. What's the answer to that?
Okay, so that's actually a very, very relevant topic, and I was recently talking about this at a Shabbat meal, actually. So usually this comes with the whole Canaanite argument, and the thing is, when you're looking at the term Canaanite and what that means, there are two different definitions of Canaanite. So you have the biblical/religious definition of what a Canaanite is, and then you have the historical/anthropological definition of what a Canaanite is. And if you look historically and anthropologically, Jews are actually classified under the umbrella term of Canaanite, which weren't a distinct people, but rather a group of people who lived in a land that was called Canaan, which is the modern-day Levant, which Israel is a part of. And that included Phoenicians, Edomites, Moabites. But the only people of this historical category that still exists today with their quote-unquote Canaanite customs and Canaanite language are the Jews. The only Canaanite language that is still spoken today is Hebrew. However, if you're looking at the biblical argument, well, then you'd be like, well, you came here and Abraham came from Iraq, and that's actually not the case. You have to go back a little bit further. So you have to go back to the story of Noah, who had 3 sons who were allotted all of the land in the world because it was just them after the flood. And the land of the Levant, which Israel is in, was given to his son Shem, which we come from, which is where the word Semite comes from, which is now just Semite is not a group of people, it's actually a language group, which Hebrew and Arabic are part of. But it was given to the sons of Shem, and Canaan was actually a son of Ham, who was allotted the land of Africa. And so it goes that the Canaanites actually came from Africa and colonized the land of Shem. And so the Canaanites were actually colonizers, and Abraham came back from where his family was exiled, came back and re-received it. And on top of that, it actually says in the Bible, and Melchizedek was the king of Shalem, which is an old name for Jerusalem. Melchizedek was Shem. So it actually belonged to a different group of people than the Canaanites. The Canaanites were the original colonizers of the land, if you're going with the biblical narrative.
And there's no more Canaanites.
They don't exist.
They exist.
They were all wiped out by the Babylonians or before, and the only people who fit the criteria of indigeneity to this land today are the Jews. So both are kind of irrelevant arguments, and the only way that it becomes a relevant argument is if you mix those two definitions, and you take from the anthropological definition of Canaanite and take from the biblical definition of Canaanite, and kind of pick and choose what details you find, convenient for your narrative.
Right. Cherry picking.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say don't tip when people are teaching Torah. I say don't cherry pick the Torah. Let's hear it all, right? Okay, let's talk about how there's a lot in this hate mail that we have. There's a lot of saying, well, you're doing the same thing that the Nazis did to you, to the Palestinians.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting for your answer on this because I know it's not true, and I don't, I'm not. It's really just, it's sickening that people believe that.
Absolutely disgusting.
Yeah.
First of all, it is a form of Holocaust denial.
Right.
It's called Holocaust inversion.
Right.
And those people should be condemned as much as we'd condemn, a white skinhead neo-Nazi saying, oh, the Holocaust never happened, because it is a form of Holocaust denial. I think the big point here is the Holocaust happened over, let's say the final solution was 1942, I believe. So 42 to 45, but if you want to start from the beginning of World War II, fine, let's start from 39. So that's 6 years.
Well, 33 came to power.
33 came to power. I'm talking like the systematic murdering of the Jewish people. Let's be generous, give it 6 years. Let's be generous and say 6 million, because it was probably a lot more than 6 million. There are newer studies that have come out and said it's probably higher, and that was just a number that came out because people wanted to know how many were gone. So let's say 6 years, 6 million Jews were murdered. That is, on average, 1 million Jews per year. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been going on since 1948, let's say, with obviously there were disputes before, and there were pogroms before. I have a list on my phone of all of the Arab pogroms against Jews in this land, going back hundreds upon hundreds of years. But I digress. So let's say in those almost 75 years, not even 100,000 people on both sides have been killed as a result of this conflict. This is the least deadly conflict in the Middle East. The Palestinian population has been growing exponentially, and the vast majority of Palestinians killed are combatants, not innocents who are being hoarded into gas chambers, before that hoarded into ghettos like animals, being fed, 80 calories a day? Yeah. When Gaza has like an obesity problem.
Just even you trying to compare it, you can't even do this.
It's so mind-boggling.
I always say that if Israel really wanted to have a Holocaust with the Palestinians, they could do it. I mean, it's not very hard. I mean, Israel's pretty technology advanced. They have one of the greatest armies in the world. They're not dying.
And they're always throwing that in our face. You have such a strong army. I'm like, then why are you here? If we're committing a genocide against you,
why are they still alive?
Why
and why
are
they're
you
growing?
here?
And why their city's getting bigger? Because there's no genocide going on.
Absolutely none.
I don't understand how they can even say, yes, things happen.
And where's this final solution? Where's this proposed, when did an Israeli leader come out and show an intent to commit genocide? Look at the IDF code of ethics. Look at what they have to do. Look at how many times we have given up our own people's lives, our own people's safety, because there were too many civilians. And then also you have to add on top of that the amount of civilians that are harmed by Palestinian leaders. When about a year and a half ago, when Hamas sent over 4,000 rockets indiscriminately into Israel, about a third of them landed short in Gaza. And so how many Palestinians were murdered by Hamas? How many Palestinians are being murdered because they're being starved by their own leaders, because they're stealing all of the foreign aid for themselves and for terror tunnels and for rockets. And being basically told, in at least in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, under the Palestinian Authority, they keep their people disenfranchised, which is why so many have to cross over into Israel proper every day to work, despite the fact that their leaders have millions upon billions of dollars. And they keep their people disenfranchised and promise them a lifelong salary as long as they can kill a Jew. How many Palestinians are being caught in the crossfire of that?
Let's talk about refugees for a second.
Okay.
I think Brandon mentioned this week when we talked, that the UN or UNWRA, UNRWA has classified the Palestinian as refugees for second and third generations, and I think
more than that, it's eternal.
Eternal. So that's the only people in the world that have been considered eternal.
What that means is that if you are a refugee leaving Syria or Ukraine right now, when you get settled into the land, they accept you. Your kids will become citizens of America, Canada, Europe, whatever that is. But if you are a refugee or the descendant of a refugee from Israel, no matter where it's from in all of Israel, not just the West Bank for sure, you never become a citizen of that land. So you're constantly kept in refugee camps in Jordan. And called a refugee. And you're called a refugee, and you have refugee status. Yeah.
It's kind of brilliant on the part of, the anti-Semite to just completely to make anyone in conflict with a Jew this eternal victim. That's exactly what it is. It's absolutely, it's offensive to actual refugees.
I know. To real ones.
To real refugees who are currently in this struggle. You see all these wars going on. You see what's happening again, like in Ukraine, in Afghanistan, in Syria. And these people, they're really going through these struggles. And you have people who have been in Lebanon since 1948, still, and their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren are called refugees. It's absolute baloney. It's ridiculous. And it's such a ploy in order to further vilify the only Jewish state. And that's why there's a double standard here. Because this double standard would not happen with any other people. It's only against the Jews. And so when people are saying anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitic, this is one of the ways we look to make sure that your criticism of the state of Israel, is it anti-Semitic or not? They call them, I don't know if I spoke about this on the last podcast, they're called the 3 Ds. Delegitimization, dehumanization, and double standard. Right. So delegitimization is we're delegitimizing your historical connection to the land. Dehumanization is stuff like blood libel, ancient anti-Semitic tropes. And double standard is we're going to hold Israel to a higher standard than the rest of the world. And your quote-unquote refugees, who are being kept refugees by the countries that they're in, by the way. Yeah. Why don't we talk about how Lebanon treats its Palestinians, for once? Or why don't we talk about how within the borders of Israel, I went to Har Gerizim, which overlooks Shechem, which is called Nablus, and I think I spoke about this the last time. You see, it's right next to the city. The refugee camp is right next to the city. It is only within the power. Where they have malls. They have malls and nice office buildings, and not in the refugee camp. No, but in the cities. Yeah.
In the cities.
And so why aren't the Palestinians living in Nablus, which Shechem? Why aren't the Palestinians living there absorbing these people into their city? It's because if they did, first of all, they have some tribal whatever, or because they know that they wouldn't have this token to dangle in front of the eyes of the world. As look at these poor refugees. Don't look at why they're still poor, but look at their sad, sad faces and know that the cause must be the evil, greedy Jew.
And what are they refugees from? Because if they're living in the West Bank, it seems like they're in the land that they're asking for. If the two-state solution is what they're asking for,
then they would say that they're refugees either from Yaffo or Haifa or wherever.
They're not really asking for a two-state solution.
I think that's the key.
And I always teach in my classes, define your terms. Right. What does it mean, peace in the Middle East? For my definition, it means I can walk to wherever I'm going in Jerusalem and not worry about getting stabbed. I'm not going to say their definition, but I think that they're not going to be happy. This is why they've never accepted a peace solution, never negotiated one, and never accepted one, because they were not going to be happy until we're all into the Mediterranean Sea.
Absolutely, and they've made it clear.
And we can't get we're not going to have peace when we have two definitions of the word peace. So this is why some people say, "Oh, plan for peace." Well, land for peace certainly hasn't worked. In fact, it's gone the exact opposite. It doesn't matter. Even before there was a state of Israel, the Nazis tried to kill the Jews, the Romans tried to kill the Jews, the Babylonians tried to kill the Jews, the Russians tried to kill the Jews, the Spaniards tried to kill the Jews. What is it going on. It is a as Ken Spiro says, it is an illogical, completely illogical hatred of the Jewish people.
Yeah.
Until we can come to terms with that, okay, Jews, run some of the places in Hollywood and they own banks, but other people do too. It's not only Jews that run Hollywood, not Jews only own Wall Street. Jews seem to obviously have some wisdom and able to come to the top of society, but that doesn't make them evil. There's no such things as protocols of elder design. There's no Jews getting together every 100 years planning, let's take over the world. You can't get 3 Jews to agree on anything. Like that, it makes no sense. We cannot agree on anything. We can't even agree on like which minyan we're going to go to. We can't agree on which Torah we're going to read. We can't agree on which movement we're going to belong to. We can't agree on anything. There's like a million movements. Like we can't agree on anything.
Yeah.
Like that just makes no sense whatsoever. And we have no divide by it. It's in the Torah that we're not supposed to become politically active. We're not supposed to become the kings. Let the kings be, and we're supposed to just be citizens of the land and follow the laws of the land. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I had to get that out.
No, for sure. I think within that, exile is a very tricky concept, and I think something that, I don't know, people often ask, how do you deal with anti-Semitism? What's your goal in the content you're creating? I think the first thing you have to know when you're putting yourself out there in that way is that it doesn't make sense and you're not going to fix it. Right now, while we're in exile, we cannot cure the disease that is anti-Semitism. We can only address the symptoms. And I think that trying to cure this disease is just going to drive you insane, thinking I'm going to go on here and I'm going to change minds. You're definitely not. And so I believe what I do is empower Jews to feel like they can stand up for themselves. And I think that within this whole thing, like when we're talking about what is peace, I mean, it reminded me, you mentioned Ken Spiro, when he's talking about like Pax Romana, like what that meant for the Romans to have peace was violent and conquer. It was just that, they had control, they had this power. And I think that's a very non-Jewish way to define peace and power is it's very external. It's who do I control? Whereas the Jewish definition of power, gvura, is internal. It's how can I control myself? How do I, take charge of what I'm doing in this world? And so
not live by my instincts.
Absolutely. And so when people are talking about it was mentioned a 2-state solution, I think first of all, anyone who believes at this point in the conflict that a 2-state solution is viable is kidding themselves.
Yes.
We are dealing with people.
They're not living in clarity.
They are not.
No, they are not.
No, they are not.
You have different definitions of the word peace. This is not clarity. It's one of the reasons why we named our podcast "Living Clarity." Because I like to live in clarity. I like to live in the truth.
Yeah.
MS. I want to know what's going on, and I don't. And people just don't want to believe it.
So to believe, first of all, I think that it's to give up any. I want to first of all talk about international law and acquisition of land, and not international law as how it's being applied to Israel, but how it's being applied to every other country on the planet. According to international law, if you win land in a defensive war, regardless of whether or not you're indigenous to it, that's a whole other argument that we definitely have. Yeah. But regardless of whether or not you're indigenous, if you win land in a defensive war, meaning if someone starts a war against you, you beat them and you take their land in that war, you are legally allowed to annex it. Yeah. And so when we're talking about, So when we're talking about Gaza, when we're talking about Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, when we're talking about even the Sinai Peninsula, which we gave back, the Golan Heights, that's all ours according to international law as it's applied to every other country on the planet. Yeah. I don't care that people are, I don't care that people think that we have to be an exception. I don't care. Also also the fact that legality does not necessarily equal morality. But if we are agreeing that this is international law and this is how it's applied to everyone else, I want it to be applied to us too. This is our land. The fact that we have to try and cut it up and cut it up and cut it up in order to appease people who have made clear they don't want peace with us. They want us dead. They want us to be dhimmis. They want us to be under apartheid law, as set forth in many, many Islamic countries. We were I'm Sephardic, I'm Mizrahi, we were under dhimmi laws. We were not allowed to do so many different things. We weren't allowed to. We were treated as second-class citizens because we were not Muslim.
Yeah.
So to say that like, oh, we should further divide our land, specifically give away the land that has the most historical significance to us, which always bothers me when people are like, why are we being so annoying about Hebron? Hebron? Are you kidding me? Like, I don't think we should trade Tel Aviv, but I would trade for Tel Aviv in a heartbeat. Tel Aviv and I think it's incredible that we built it from the ground up. I love Tel Aviv. It's
actually the most Jewish city in the world.
That's amazing.
Because Jerusalem has a lot of Arabs in it.
Yeah.
So Tel Aviv is mostly Jewish.
It's amazing. And I'm
More
not
than New
saying
York.
we should give it up, but the fact that these people have lost sight of the importance of places like Hebron, okay, then why wasn't Israel made in another, if you don't
Uganda.
care about Hebron, why wasn't it made in Uganda?
Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah. And it shouldn't have been made in Uganda. It should have been made here because this is where we're from. But
well, not just that.
yeah, there's so many different things.
Yeah,
Again, there's
that's
so
the
many
tip of the
different
iceberg.
arguments that when you look through logically, international law, indigeneity, historical, biblical, military-wise, if you look at every single way that anyone else has ever acquired a piece of land, the Jews did it. We are indigenous to this land. We won it through international law. We fought a defensive war. We won that defensive war. The nations of the world came together and voted, and they said, yeah, you can be a country. The previous colonizers gave us the land. Every single criteria that would allow a people to have ownership of a land, we have met. And the only reason people can't stand it is because we're Jewish.
I know. Let's move on a little bit to a new story coming up.
Yeah.
You know, we have a holiday coming up in a few months for Purim, and it's almost like we are reliving the Purim story again today. You have this one country who wants to destroy us, and they openly say it. I mean, it's like, we want you dead. Like, it's not even, which is Iran, which is Persia, which is the story of Purim.
Yeah.
So when you see the news today and like, what do you think? Like, oh my gosh, it's just repeating itself.
I mean, there's nothing new under the sun.
It's crazy, isn't it?
First of all, Purim is, anyone who knows me knows I'm absolutely obsessed. It's my favorite holiday. It's my favorite book to study. I have an entire shelf in my room that's just dedicated to Megillot.
Yeah. Megillah is the book.
Yeah, the
book
scroll of Esther.
That's the book we read on Purim, the book of Esther.
And so there's this idea that Esther's name in Tehillim, she's called Ayelet HaShachar, which means the breaking of the dawn. And it's this interesting concept because Esther was at the close of the canon of the Hebrew Bible. And so you're thinking, like, she comes at the end of the age of prophecy. Wouldn't she be sunset, not sunrise? Because the age of prophecy, there's light, and now we're in exile and it's dark, but it's really the other way around. That at that time, there was this sort of darkness, this sort of like, I need to cling on to nevuah, to cling on to prophecy in order to have a relationship with God. And now it's just us and him, you know? And I heard something really, really beautiful last Purim of Megillat Esther is one of two books in the Bible that does not say the name of God. The other book is Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. And if you've read Shir HaShirim, you know it's this beautiful romantic poem. Yes. And so, like, why isn't the name of God in there? Because when you're so close, when you're in, you know, when Moses is talking to God, and he's like revealing his presence from the rock, and he has like he sees the back of his head. There's also no names being used, and you're like, what's going on? It's because when you're so intimate with someone, a name is almost
too formal.
Too formal. It kind of what's the word? It confines it. It constricts what it is. It's so much more than that. It's so much deeper than that. And like, you're so much more than your name. And so
your
really,
because you're in love with the soul, not the body.
It's so, absolutely, and it's so deep. And so this is the book that carries us through exile. This is a book about exile. It does not end with, you know, us coming back to Israel, even though very soon after, Esther's son, Daryavesh, approves Nehemiah's request for rebuilding the second temple after Achashverosh had halted the rebuilding. So we know after this, there is, you know, light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. But it does not end, and honestly, it does not end on a very happy note. If you know what's going on, Esther was kidnapped and raped by Achashverosh. And you know, the story ends, and we're like, yay, the Jews are saved. And Esther is stuck with her abuser for another 2 years until he dies. And so
Is that?
I'm not sure a lot of our viewers know
wait
that.
A second. Wait, back up for a second.
Sorry.
Wait. This is the after story.
Yeah.
Because this is not in the movie.
Yeah. Right. So a lot of people are just, learning.
This is not Harry Potter with yourself. This is
like
sure.
scene.
So they'll learn Purim in Hebrew school, which they rightfully, censor the fact that the beauty pageant was Achashverosh systematically raping a giant portion of his kingdom, kidnapping these girls from their homes, forcing them into this.
This seems very common. When the Greek king was here, Holofernes, he was also, when Jews had to get married, he had to sleep with the wife, the woman, before she got married.
Yeah. It's very unfortunate.
We call it rape. I don't know what you call that. You're forcing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it is rape. And so I think something very interesting in all my studying of Esther is that a lot of times when you look at the way it describes Esther's relationship with Achashverosh, you see a lot of trauma responses within it. So like the Gemara says, whenever Achashverosh called her to him, she was karka olam, she was like the earth. And the Zohar takes from that a demon would take her place. She had this out-of-body experience. So like there are different ways to interpret this. The fact that, a lot of people have heard this, like Esther was green. What does that mean? It means, it can mean a whole bunch of things. There are a bunch of ways. But one of the interpretations of Esther being green was every time she was called to Achashverosh, she would turn green because she was so sick at the thought of him. The reason Bigtan and Teresh wanted to assassinate Achashverosh, and you're thinking and a lot of people may not know, Mordechai and Esther were likely married, says the Gemara, says the Talmud.
They're first cousins, right?
Yes, but that was normal.
Common,
at the time.
It's common. It's
most
common.
Of our anyway. And so you're thinking, like, if they're going to kill Achashverosh, then Esther can go back to her husband and she doesn't have to, why? It's because Esther's life was in danger too, because they were planning to assassinate the both because they were so sick of, constantly having to bring them water and towels in the middle of the night, which is such a disturbing thing to hear. This was a woman who was so horribly abused, and a lot of people really don't know that. And so there is this sort of bittersweetness within the miracle of Purim that that this woman is still in this abusive situation. And I think it's important to point that out because unfortunately there are so many survivors of sexual violence out there, and so many women know what it's like to be in a similar situation. And I think that Esther really provides this role model of and it's so hard to talk about this stuff because everyone has such a different experience, but that through that there is still, you can still have power in that. Your power wasn't taken away from you. You have not been stripped of yourself, and you had the opportunity to overcome that and to still do great things in this world. And I think that sexual violence specifically can be a very dehumanizing experience. Unfortunately, most women I know have been through it on some scale. And to have a woman who an entire book of the Torah was named after her, and she's not the only survivor we see in the Tanakh, who is literally the hero, who took the chance, because she didn't have to go to Achashverosh. Mordechai tells her very clearly in the Megillah, chapter 4, verse 14, if you should be silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come to the Jewish people through another means, but you and your father's house will be destroyed, and who knows if it was for this moment that you were brought to royalty. And that's actually on this ring. I have that verse there.
Oh, wow.
That must be a big ring.
Yeah, it's not the full verse. It's just, and who knows if it was for this moment you were brought to royalty. Who knows if it was for this. So no matter what, the Jewish people are going to be saved, but you have the opportunity to choose, do I want to be a part of that salvation, or do I just want to stand idly by? And there are so many incredible deep messages that come from the Megillah, and I think that's the one that I always want to carry with me is at any given moment, you were put here for a reason, that's clear. You were put in the palace for a reason. You know you were put there for a reason. You're a good Jewish girl. You know that Hashem does everything for a reason, and that's not taking away from the horrors that are happening to you. But was it for this moment that you were put here, when you can choose not to stand idly by, not to be afraid, but to do good and to help out your fellow brother, even when her life really wasn't in danger?
So what I want to know is how you relate that today. How is that story playing out today?
I think in so many ways, obviously,
Is there an Esther in Iran right now? That's the question. Maybe because we have Ahmadinejad. I don't know who's the leader there.
Yeah,
I think it's called the Mossad.
Mossad? That's probably. I mean, I know that supposedly they keep saying they find agents in Iran. Who knows there are not? I'm sure there are agents there, but they're threatening to destroy Israel.
Yeah.
Constantly. Yeah.
I think even on like a personal level, I mean, because if we're looking at the villain of the Purim story is Haman, who's an Amalekite, and Amalek was this nation that came from Esav, but really Amalek today, it's doubt, because the gematria is the same, the numerical value of those words in Hebrew are the same. It's doubt in yourself. It's anti-Semitism as it manifests today. So to not stand idly by in that anti-Semitism or in whatever, struggle you're going through, to say that I am bigger than my fears, I am bigger than, what everyone is saying I'm capable of. I think that's what Esther is. It's about, this is the situation I've been put in, and all of us go through our own struggles, hopefully not as hard as the ones that she faced, but it is within those struggles that you find your purpose.
Yeah.
It is within those struggles that you find, what am I here to do? What am I here to fix? And I can either say, you know what, someone else will come along and fix it, or you know what, I'm here for a reason, and all of this pain, and I'm not judging anyone for how they deal with pain or trauma, but there is a mindset of all this pain can be just pain, or all of this pain could have been for something. It could have brought me to this point where I can now help someone else.
Don't waste the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I want to talk about how you have taken this mission on, and you created a TikTok. It got extremely popular. You got up to 24,000 followers, and then TikTok banned you.
Yeah.
So what's going on right now in your TikTok life?
So, right now I'm thank God I get to work with Aisha Torah, and I get to make content for them on their own accounts, which is very, very nice. And I love the stuff that they put out here.
What's it called on TikTok? Aish what?
I think it's
Jewish?
Aish Jewish, I think.
Jewish.
And then I have my backup account, which is called Purim Enthusiast. I bet you can't guess why. So that has like 3,000 followers. It's just very small. But basically, I had just gotten a message from TikTok that I was being permanently banned because I was under the age of 13. Clearly.
Wow.
So I've been working on appeals. I'm not hopeful about getting it back, and honestly, it was very hard. Like I felt very, upset. I'd spent 3 years building this up.
What was the reason why they banned you? Not because you were 13.
Yes.
That's the reason.
That's what they told me.
That's the official reason they gave her.
That's the official reason.
That's the message I got.
But you have proof you're over 13.
Yeah, so I
right?
appealed. I showed ID that I'm.
She's on the
clearly,
videos. She's the face of her TikTok channel.
I'm so flattered that I look so young.
Wow.
So obviously it was like a mass reporting of whatever. Like I don't know what went on behind the scenes, but TikTok does have an anti-Semitism problem, and it is known for silencing Jewish creators. But I lost my train of thought. Anyway,
getting it back. You're trying to get it back.
Yeah, so I'm in the appeals process. This has happened to me before, but so at the beginning when it happened, I was very upset. But I remember it was like a Thursday night, and that Friday night I decided to go to a shul with my friends for Kabbalat Shabbat, and which like I don't normally go to the shul, but whatever. My friend was going, and we were going to the same meal. And I walk in, and this girl like recognized me, and I had been feeling like it was all for nothing, like 3 years of work, and I just felt like really sad. And this girl just like recognized me. She's like, "Are you the girl from TikTok, whatever?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." And I was like, "This is a sore spot." And she was like, "You really helped me on my Baal Tshuva journey. You helped me to become more Jewish and to be proud of my Jewish identity." And I remember in that moment being like, "Okay, Hashem, like it wasn't all for nothing. Thank you."
Yeah.
Wow.
And life is hard. That's why we're here. We go through in the scheme of things, this is really, if this is the worst thing that ever happens to me, I'm a very, very lucky person.
Yeah.
It can be frustrating, but I can only control where I go from here. So whether or not I'm going to like work on my backup account to try and build up this following, I don't know, but I know that I want to continue helping Jews. I know that I want to continue helping them feel empowered and helping them learn about their Jewish identity in whatever way I do that. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do that yet.
We want to help you.
I would love that.
Yeah, we want to help you.
Yeah.
We think you're very special. We think you have a lot of strength and wisdom, and we think that you're a pleasure to interview.
Thank you.
Like, and we obviously shows by the number of views that you have on our platform. But of course, Brandon and I live the same life. We're doing the same thing.
We're doing our best to all have that,
share
that mission.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think it's going to happen beyond TikTok. Also on TikTok, hopefully you can build Purim Enthusiast at Purim Enthusiast back up to that, hopefully to 100 million. We'll
never get to, right?
A ton more viewers, and it can go smoothly. But beyond the TikTok screen, I guess is what's next.
Yeah.
Are you on other platforms as well?
I'm on Instagram and Twitter. You can follow me at Instagram at hila.oz. And
can you say that again slowly?
hila.oz, my full name.
Hila Oz, okay.
And then on Twitter, I am Toteskosh, TOTESKOSH.
Totes Coach.
Which is like a shortened version of Totally Kosher. It was actually, that was my original TikTok name before my first account was permanently banned. And then Totally Kosher was my original backup account. Now I have another backup account at Perm Enthusiast.
By a backup account, do you mean you're sharing the same videos? You're always prepared?
No, like I'm just, I would be like on post bans for a week or two. So I'd just make another account so I could post whatever. I don't know. It really started, I just had made like a bunch of Purim content, and I just wanted to talk about like ridiculous commentaries about like Haman's daughter pooping herself that I found in the Me'am Loez, which is so great. And so I would just like post these random things that I'd read about the Megillah. And then so now I'm posting a little bit more, but we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you.
We're running out of time, but we were talking before the show. You missed this about one of her favorite comments that she gets, which is that God is not a real estate agent.
Yeah, I mean, like if you do anything in Zionism, you know that they have like 10 things that they say. They're like one of those, wind up toys with a string that have like catchphrases, and one of them is that God is not a real estate agent. And I think that one I recently got it again, and I just think it's such a funny thing to say, because if we're operating, I don't make the religious argument because I know it doesn't work for people who are not religious.
Yes.
And there are so many arguments that do work. I'm mostly talking about history, and then people will be like, God is not a real estate agent. I'm like, if we are operating on the reality that God exists,
right.
He can't give land because he doesn't have a certificate in real estate.
Like,
he
can do anything he wants. He's God, right?
Yeah, no.
He heals. He does everything else.
But he can't do real estate. Sorry about that. Love you. Anyway.
Public banker.
I mean, and so, I mean, there are so many. Also, the early political Zionist movement, not a religious movement. Most Zionists are not religious Jews. Most Jews aren't living here because of this whole, like, God gave us this land thing. They're living here because this is where we come from, and this is where, like, our culture is, and we feel safe here, and there's so many things here, and we love it here, and it's amazing. So no one is claiming that God is a real estate agent, but if God did, I mean, this is the first Rashi on the Torah. If God created the world, he can give things out. Yeah. This is his. Yeah. But again, I'm not making the religious. People are gonna comment on this, like, oh, she thinks. Before
I was observing, people would say, "Does God really care if you eat cheese and put cheese on a hamburger?" And I guess he does. Because he couldn't make a law, you can't do it.
Yeah.
So, whatever.
But
anyway, when it comes to real estate, though,
no, real estate can't do.
He didn't.
He has
no license for it. No. Like, it's just. I mean, I just think, again, a lot of the arguments you'll hear are just very ridiculous. And if you break them down, usually they're talking about something entirely different from what people are saying. Like, I'll be saying, Hamas fired 4,000 rockets into Israel, and they'll be like, God is not a real estate agent. I'm like, okay, cool, amazing. Great. What does one have to do with the other? Yeah. Why? it's actually, I just want to point this out because you'll notice it's a very common pattern when you're talking about anti-Semitism is, again, that it's nonsensical. So you will make an argument and they will just talk about something entirely different because they can't answer what you're saying. And so they'll just change the subject until you prove them wrong again, and then they have to change the subject again. So if you're ever arguing with one of these people, I very much suggest that you force them to actually answer the question before they move on. Anyway.
One of the challenges I think that goes on is they're not just, sometimes people feel unequipped to handle these questions. So I'm wondering if you could share a key to clarity to help our listeners feel more confident about the information that they're receiving and know more about this topic.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a sucky answer, but study. Unfortunately, it is. And I mean, it's hard because it's a very long, complicated conflict. And obviously Israel isn't perfect and there are uncomfortable things to learn about our history. But if you don't know them, you won't know what to do if someone is going, or just don't engage with these people. You don't have to. You don't have to answer every comment. You don't have to answer every single anti-Semite. You could sometimes just laugh at them. I think it's very, very important to just not take it seriously. Obviously, it's a serious issue, but in a personal way, if someone is attacking you verbally or trying to say all of these things, just don't give them power. Again, you're not going to change their mind. It's just a symptom. You can't, cure the disease. So I think to laugh at this stuff is so important. And that's what Purim is. Like, they say Haman, we boo him, we step on bubble wrap, we have the grogger.
Do shots.
We do shots, we dress up, we have a party. And, that's what we do with anti-Semites is we make fun of them. We're going to make fun of Paro on Pharaoh on Passover. Yeah. We're going to make fun of every single person who has ever tried to kill us. They're gone. And if you keep trying to kill us, history does not, You
cut us down like grass, we grow back stronger. We keep coming back.
Absolutely. So just to make fun of it, I think that's such an incredible lesson that we get from Purim is that when you see an anti-Semite, you take away his power by making fun of him.
I think that's another thing that Jews have been very good at historically.
Yes.
Oh, we're so good at that. Yeah.
Right. Yep. Wow, there's obviously so much more on this topic. We have thousands of comments that we could have gone through. Hopefully we'll have you on again sometime.
No, we will have you on again. Just when it's going to be, right?
Yeah, we would love
to.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for taking the time
Thank you
to
so
join
much.
us.
Thank you for bringing me back. It's always such a pleasure. I love doing this.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for joining this episode of the Living in Clarity podcast.
We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Living in Clarity podcast.
If you enjoy what you just heard, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment with any suggestions for future episodes.
We'll see you next time.